if it wasn't discrimination. And you have the nerve, no. You have the nerve to sit there on your high horse and preach to these bottom-feeding dwellers who sit in the chat room, like Alliance Blog, who's been doing this for over a decade and still only got 2,000 followers. Yeah, I see you. You're a jabroni and a ham sandwich, and I don't want to hear from you ever again. About what the NWA is supposed to do. This is what pro wrestling is supposed to be. This is what the NWA is supposed to be. No. You don't tell anyone what the NWA is supposed to be, and you certainly don't lecture me about what the NWA is supposed to be. I made the NWA.
Welcome.
If it wasn't discrimination.
What day is it today?
Tuesday?
Wrong. It's NWA Day.
They want NWA? Let's give them NWA.
I was thinking that it might be a good idea if you and I formed an alliance.
Let's get ready to rumble.
Thanks for joining the stream. This has been a presentation of
Attention everyone. Welcome to the greatest wrestling program in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? Stop what you're doing and listen.
Okay, let's party.
It's the pre-party with J. Cal.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the pre-party, a presentation of Alliance-Wrestling.com, your number one source for news and information for the National Wrestling Alliance. My name is J. Cal. Each and every Tuesday, we come talking to you, our hashtag NWA fam, to talk about all things NWA. And I don't mean the rap group. No. I mean the pro wrestling organization founded in 1948, made famous on the backs of Lou Thez, Nature Boy Ric Flair, and so many others. Dory Funk Jr., Terry Funk, Orville Brown. There's a lot of guys. Who is your favorite world's heavyweight champion throughout the years? I hate that question, to be quite honest with you. I hate when people ask me, what's your Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling? Daddy, there is no Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling because there's like 20 or 30 names that were necessary to get us to that point. And I can't just simply tell you one guy or two guys. There's like one guy every 10 years that made a difference. You go back to Lou Thez. Like Orville Brown was the first NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. So he's the guy that kind of got the ball rolling. But Lou Thez is the guy that unified all those world titles, right? Lou Thez came into Los Angeles, winning the world title. Chicago won their world title. Won all the world titles. That's why we call it the World's Heavyweight Championship. There is no apostrophe because this title right here, the 10 pounds of gold, literally represents the world titles of pro wrestling prior to the formation of the National Wrestling Alliance. This is true. If you don't believe me, well, you're wrong. Real quick, we're going to go with the Willie Bowen joke of the day. Hey, J. Cal, what do Tyrus, Rolando Freeman, and the Spectaculars 2.0 all got in common? They're all losers. Damn, Willie. Just call it like you see it, right? Oh, man. That's awesome. So we go live on TikTok the hour before the pre-party. And during the pre-party, not only did my walker almost collapse on top of me, but we had a lot of fun things. We're talking about Lucha Libre AAA. I got to hang out with my boy, Mecha Wolf, former NWA two-time tag team champion. Got to see him down in Tijuana. I've watched him wrestle more outside of the state of California than I have inside the state of California. Always a good dude. He was wrestling in AAA, teaming up with Deluxe, who's formerly known as El Hijo de Rey Mysterio, and is currently one of the standouts for Crash. They teamed together to take on Pagano and Psycho Clown in a match that was all over the place. I literally had Psycho Clown and Deluxe right in front of me with beer being thrown at me. It was pretty awesome. And if you guys have never had an opportunity to go to a Lucha Libre show in Mexico, that's something that you need to change. And I'm looking at you, Mr. Sam Retro. I think you need to go to a Lucha Libre show one of these days because south of the border, it gets wild, man. It's good stuff. This year alone, I have been to 3 events down in TJ at the auditorium. I'm supposed to be going to one this Friday. I may or may not go. I just found out that I'll be going solo if I do. So, which isn't strange. I've done that before. It's nothing new. But yeah, man. So it's exciting times for the NWA. Of course, we are going into this week's episode of POWERRR. And what a great time for the NWA. I really feel like we have been on the cusp of some pretty great pro wrestling lately. We're seeing things from the NWA that I feel like we haven't seen in a while. And it's interesting to bring that up because, well, it was 6 years ago this weekend that your boy Jay literally flew to Atlanta. I flew to Atlanta to cover the National Wrestling Alliance. And, it was quite the surreal experience. I got to meet some really cool people when I went out there. Of course, that's the first time I met Gary Horn, who I think the absolute world of. I got to meet, I had already met some friends from the 70th anniversary show, but I got to meet up with some of my old friends who used to watch the NWA quite regularly. And, to think about where the NWA was to where it is now, there's reasons to be happy and sad for both ways, right? Because there was something so beautiful and unique and special about the Georgia Public Broadcasting Studios in Atlanta. The setup was so reminiscent of the Jim Crockett promotions. It screamed old school with the most subtle nods. The cameras that were, those big industrial sized cameras. It was, it was Dave Marquez doing his best Gordon Solie at the counter. It was Jim Cornette in the commentary booth with Joe Galley. It was so much perfection. And on those nights, we got to be reacquainted with guys like Josephus, who later would become the Question Mark. We got to become familiar with Ricky Saints, who back then was Ricky Starks. Trevor Murdoch was almost retired from the sport of pro wrestling when he showed up that night in Atlanta. We had, Ken Anderson make his return to pro wrestling, Colt Cabana, Cowboy James Storm, L.A. Knight, Eli Drake, Sean Ricker, whatever you want to call him. You had such phenomenal talent. Eddie Kingston, Thunder Rosa. Like, my head exploded when I saw Thunder Rosa. I had no idea she would be showing up at this event for the NWA. Melina Perez, Marty Bell, Allison Kay. Of course, Tom Latimer teaming with Royce Isaacs as the wild card, and Nick Aldis. Who could forget that guy? It was very special in that, it's kind of funny because All In, which was the catapult to AEW, which launched AEW, in many ways launched Billy Corgan's NWA as well. And that title match that put, Nick Aldis in the ring with Cody Rhodes in Illinois on that September 15th really catapulted the interest of the NWA. And when they eventually announced their TV in 2019, just 2 years later, they did the anniversary show, they did the Crockett Cup with Ring of Honor. But when they finally got to Atlanta on September 30th and filmed the first episode of Power in 2019, they had a very unique roster and something that they haven't had in a long time, which was genuine, credible excitement. The NWA was fire, man, and people were excited to see it. It was such a magical experience, and to be a part of that was pretty awesome. A lot of people would later go on to poo-poo the Question Mark. Ricky Starks left the company during COVID. The soft relaunch in 2021 was difficult to watch at times, but the product really did do so much in that short amount of time, from 2017 when Billy Corgan purchased it to 2019 when they started filming their first shows. And it was a promotion that really reinvigorated my love and passion for the National Wrestling Alliance, got me excited about the NWA again. And although we had been podcasting about what was happening in the NWA for years before and will continue to do years after, it was really cool to be a part of that moment, to watch POWERRR kick off in that Georgia Public Broadcasting studio. Dave Scooby, I didn't meet Dave Scooby there, but eventually did get to meet Dave Scooby, and he was there. It was magic, I must say. It was very surreal. And again, I really do feel like, you got to give props to Billy Corgan, but also to Cody Rhodes, to the Elite, not necessarily AEW, but the Elite, because the fever pitch that was there at 2018 for All In, a year after Billy Corgan bought the NWA, 2018, the biggest match of the year was supposed to be Nick Aldis and Colt Cabana in China, an event that I went to. I paid out for that one. I showed up for China to see that matchup. And during that matchup, during that week that I was in China with the United Wrestling Network, I got to see the planning and the rollout of what was coming for All In. And I don't think even then that Billy Corgan or Dave Marquez or Dave Lagana even knew how excited and how fever pitched that this event was going to be for the NWA. This was a big deal, and it propelled the NWA so far that once they did the 70th anniversary show with highlighted with Nick Aldis defending challenging Cody Rhodes for the World's Heavyweight Championship. On that card, you had guys like Sammy Guevara, you had the aforementioned Ricky Starks, you had Paro, you had Willie Mack, you had Colt Cabana, and all those guys ended up being a part of AEW down the road. So I guess, I'm going down your memory lane here, but 6 years, a lot of people counted the NWA out, and COVID, when COVID happened and the promotion essentially took a knee, a lot of people thought the NWA was done. And like Retro says, it wasn't the best of times in 21 and 22. And there were some good moments. I mean, look, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that Trevor Murdoch ascending from, basically wrestling obscurity to become the national champion and later world's heavyweight champion, that was a big deal for me. I thought that was like a beautiful thing in pro wrestling, to see, Eddie Kingston really finally get an opportunity to showcase who he was. Really big deal. That's awesome. Oops, didn't mean to play that one. But there was a good moment. It was a good moment for the NWA, and those first initial tapings in the PBS studios will always be memorable for me. Going to the Waffle House and meeting up with my buddies there in Atlanta, it was such a great moment. And I haven't had that feeling since, but we've had a lot of cool meetups since then. And, again, we were there at the 75th anniversary, there at the 76th anniversary, been at the Crockett Cup. We've had some good times. And I'm not saying that the NWA is down right now. I think this is the best the NWA's been since that fever pitch debut of POWERRR. I mean, you even had wrestlers like The Rock congratulating the NWA on those early episodes. It might have been a novelty. It might have been a gimmick, a shtick, whatever you want to call it, but it resonated with the fans. The NWA has struggled to find that same audience it had in those early POWERRR tapings, but I feel like we're starting to see the NWA evolve to where it should be. I feel like we're finally starting to get caught up with where things were supposed to be. And maybe had COVID never happened, and maybe we never had a worldwide pandemic that put a kibosh to everything the NWA is doing, I think we're finally getting to that point. Now, of course, the scenery's changed. You know, there's no more wild card. Nick Aldis is a general manager for SmackDown. Cody Rhodes is the world champion in WWE. Eddie Kingston has been one of the top guys in AEW. I mean, he's been out, but he's coming back or has come back. Zicky Dice, multiple time United Wrestling Network TV champion. Camille signed to TNA, Thunder Rosa, TNA, excuse me, not TNA, AEW, excuse me. Guys like, Marty Bell recently won the Exodus Pro NWA Women's Championship in Exodus Pro. That was easy for me to say. James Storm, gone. LA Knight, superstar in the WWE. We lost Josephus. Sadly, he passed away. Our good friend Jack Stain is gone. But what we have now is this dynamic, this roster that's evolving, and we're starting to see the NWA kind of take a big step forward. And as we celebrate, look, they're bringing in guys like Hammerstone, who had a great reputation before coming to the NWA, and that's right, Tasha Steelz. That's another good one. Retro. Tasha Steelz was a part of the early NWA in PBS studios. But now we're seeing this formation of the National Wrestling Alliance where, Trevor Murdoch isn't an obscure wrestler. Trevor Murdoch is a celebrated NWA champion, having held 3 of the top titles in the NWA. Currently is listed as a World Tag Team Champion with Mike Knox. They have a World Junior Heavyweight. Remember, too, when Power started, there was only 3 sets of titles, right? The tag titles, the world title, and the women's world title. And in this time, over the 6 years, they've created, they reintroduced the television title, the national title, the women's tag team titles were created. They brought back the World Junior Heavyweight title, the Mid-America Championship, the U.S. tag titles. The NWA has made almost as many belts as AEW has. But I digress, because I guess one of the things that I'm very excited about this incarnation of the NWA is not only are they bringing in guys like Hammerstone and Shotzi Blackheart, and not only and Rich Swann and the Colognes, but they brought back someone who I very much am a huge fan of. I'm wearing this shirt today to commemorate that. The Pope, Nick Aldis. Well, obviously, I don't give 2 shits about Nick Aldis, but the Pope, man, the Pope is back. And you gotta love it, Daddy, that the Pope is back. If you're a fan of the NWA, this is an awesome moment for us, because the Pope was the prototype for what I want out of my TV champion. And I get it. Brian Idol is your world television champion, and I don't think the Pope is heading into a feud with Brian Idol anytime soon. But the Pope's return to the NWA looks like it's going to be in a series of matches with the Mims. At least that's where the storyline looks to be going. We saw the promo 2 weeks ago when they came back to Tampa for TV. Now, the last time we saw the Pope in an NWA ring, it was when he was teaming with Jay the God, JTG, against the Miserably Faithful of Gaagz, the Gymp, and Judias. It always felt like the Pope's story with the National Wrestling Alliance was incomplete. His run as the TV title, still to this day, I think was the best used TV champion for the NWA. And, Ricky Starks had that belt for 2 days before losing it to Zicky Dice, which through the magic of the NWA felt like weeks and weeks of programming. But, I think when the Pope won the title at the Primetime Live in Long Beach, California, Thunder Studios with United Wrestling Network, it really kind of made the TV title something that Ricky Starks didn't have a chance to do, something that Zicky Dice didn't have the chance to do. The Pope was able to do it. And, of course, you got to give credit to the promoters, Billy Corgan, but you have to give credit to the Pope for being able to carry that ball to run with, right? Now, after the Pope did leave the NWA, he ended up appearing in wrestling promotions like the United Wrestling Network, doing matches for not only Memphis, but also Derby City Wrestling. He made appearances and still makes appearances for Mark Henry's All Caribbean Wrestling. And, of course, he still continues to do the charity work with Love Alive. and their corresponding pro wrestling events. So after a nearly 3-year sabbatical, the NWA welcomes back Elijah Burke into the ring to face Big Strong Mims and what I can only imagine is the main event tonight on this week's Power. Now, it is a non-title match, but I think that's saying a lot about the NWA that we finally have this back. We finally have the Pope back. And I'm not saying that the Pope is the missing piece that's going to complete the NWA, but it's good to see him back in an NWA ring. It's good to have him, just to be seen again. So I'm excited about that. I think it's going to be very, very exciting. And I hope you guys are just as excited as I am. Let's see. King Shawn Mega says, I'm back. I like 3 titles. Make it more valuable and hard to reach. Yeah, if we go back, like, look, I feel like there is too many titles on Power. I feel like the NWA they overdid it, right? Like, of course, there was so much excitement with the NWA 73rd anniversary show, I think it was. Maybe it was the 72nd. Yeah, it was 72nd when they had brought back in Power, or they had Power, and they crowned a women's tag team champions. The need for those tag team titles were non-existent then and really not existing now. Like, there's no need to have those tag titles because there isn't much of a women's tag team division. Plus, it's, between the TV title and the national title, and even if we want to go more and more, like TV, national, Mid-American, I mean, these are all the same thing. All of these titles could be won. So with all that being said, I'm very excited to see what's going to happen on Power this week. I'm excited to see what's going to happen with all the titles that I just mentioned. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But I want to go through your guys' comments. I'm reading your comments. I'm here. And Noob, I am having a good day. Noob is asking Sam Retro, how do you feel about the current presentation of NWA Power? And I know you were asking Noob, but I'm gonna give you my answer. Excuse me, Noob. I know you were asking Retro, but I'm gonna give you my answer in that I feel like the NWA presentation is top notch. I mean, the quality of the show looks good. If you guys are watching NWA on Fire or Into the Fire, excuse me, which is the weekly YouTube show that they started doing, where you get some promos and some hype for this week's Power, plus a never-before-seen match, it seems. This week, it was a junior heavyweight scramble in what was basically an empty arena. They hadn't let the fans in yet, but that kind of stuff to me is super interesting, and I felt like that was a very good show to watch. But I feel like the quality is there. The wrestlers are there. I just wish the booking was better. Patrick Moore says, I know I asked you earlier, but I didn't get to hear your answer. Besides Jim Crockett Promotions, what other NWA members were running in the 80s? And Chris Drummond answered, there wasn't much of an NWA in the 80s. The bigger members like World Class left. Well, that's not entirely true, though, Chris, because not only did you have, there was Mid-South, which would later become UWF. There was still Georgia Championship Wrestling. There was still, what were they called? I guess it was just Florida Championship Wrestling in the 80s. There was Don Owens Portland Wrestling. And World Class was still a member of the NWA in the 80s. I think they exited maybe the late 80s, like 86, 87. I think Mid-South did too. But you had Portland a part of the NWA until 1992. New Japan Pro Wrestling was part of the NWA in the 90s. Late 80s. All Japan was a member in the early part of the 80s. And EMLL, the previous name of CMLL, was also part of the NWA back in the 80s. So, I mean, all those promotions were still running. And, of course, I don't believe Hollywood closed as an NWA office like in 84, maybe 85, kind of during Vince's westward expansion. So you had a lot of NWA promoters in the 80s. Now, World Class was a bigger member. when they exited, that was a big deal, but you also still had Jim Crockett Promotions until he sold to Ted Turner, AOL Time Warner, all that stuff, and which ushered in WCW. But yeah, there was a lot of members that were still around. And Portland was one of the bigger ones. Portland had Rowdy Roddy Piper on the roster, Scott Levy, a.k.a. Scotty the Body, a.k.a. Johnny Flamingo, a.k.a. Raven. Was it Scotty Flamingo? Anyways, so yeah, Portland was kind of a big territory until 92. And then, of course, New Japan left in 93, along with WCW. And EMLL, I believe, left in like 92, the same time Don Owens did. Now, you still had Steve Uckland, who was like the New Zealand promoter. Although he didn't do a lot of shows when he was a member of the NWA, but he still had membership in New Zealand. And then, of course, that wave of, like post 93, you had Jim Crockett Jr. form NWA Dallas. And you had, Dennis Corluzzo in New Jersey and Howard Brody in Florida. And then that would evolve to having Joe Price in Florida and Ken Taylor in Texas. And, they did start evolving, Dave Republic and Jim Miller. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot more, but there was the NWA never stopped existing. Even when WCW left the NWA in 1991 and again in 93, there was still a lot of territories of the NWA. And of course, they exploded almost overnight when Dan the Beast Severin became part of the WWE roster in like 1998. Chris says in the 90s, most of the territories were dead. Mid 80s, a few more were chugging along. That's fair. But they were, I mean, you gotta acknowledge Jim Crockett Jr. was running Dallas in 94 and parts of 95. Smoky Mountain was, using NWA talents, but not really a part of the NWA. Of course, ECW was around in 93 as part of the NWA, Tri-City Wrestling Alliance, whatever you want to call it. There were still a lot of people there. And yeah, Willie, I did read your joke. I got you. Missouri and Hawaii. Okay. Sorry. What happened there? Okay. All right, there we go. Impact says NWA works with the All Japan Pro Wrestling today. Yeah, I mean, let's pump the brakes there. They don't work with the NWA. They've booked some NWA talent, Talos and EC3 to be exact. But it's not like All Japan Pro Wrestling has a deal with the NWA. There's not some sort of talent agreement where they're sharing talents or anything like that. The one promotion that you could maybe say that the NWA has a working agreement with would probably be the World Wrestling Council in Puerto Rico. That's probably the closest thing they have to a working relationship with a promotion that's outside of the NWA. And I know that because we've had Brian Idol, we've had Tom Latimer defend the NWA World title there. We had Brian Idol. He was at one point the Puerto Rican TV champion. And most recently, even our very own Trevor Murdoch had appeared for them. And of course, we've had, on the flip side, we've had the Colognes come to the NWA as well. So I wouldn't exactly say that they weren't like, what was I trying to say? I wouldn't say that there's a real relationship between All Japan and the NWA. And in fact, when I spoke to EC3, he made it sound more like that was really Dory Funk Jr. getting EC3 that opportunity to wrestle in All Japan. It wasn't really through the office. And of course, yeah, Chris, of course, Bill Behrens. How could I forget Bill Behrens? He was very important to the NWA, not only with Wildside and Anarchy, but also as the former NWA president. And he, Music City Wrestling in the late 90s. Started off in Nashville with Burt Prentice, but, kind of became a NWA territory with Mike Rapata holding the NWA World Heavyweight title and later, and before than the NWA North American Championship. And Retro brings up Ohio Valley. Yeah, that's correct too. And then, and Chris, that's true too. I definitely would say that Maple Leaf is friendly with the NWA, but it's not exactly like they have a working agreement. I don't feel like anybody really has a working agreement with the NWA currently. Like I said, the closest one might be World Wrestling Council Puerto Rico, but it's not like it's a deal where with Billy Corgan. I think it's just the talent. And yes, Willie, 100% yes. EC3 did go to Japan with the World's Heavyweight Championship, but that wasn't a deal brokered by Billy or the NWA. And if what EC3 said to me was correct, it was really like, the relationship that he had with Dory Funk Jr. MLP is friendly with everyone's. Yeah, maybe. Retro brings up a good point. The NWA had 25 territories in 98. I don't know if that's true. That sounds like a reach. But there was a lot of promotions that were associated or affiliated with the NWA, like Bluegrass. NWA Bluegrass is a promotion that probably none of you guys have heard of. They didn't have a big presence online, but they would regularly feature like Al Snow and, some of the C-level pro wrestlers. Like, they would bring in guys that had some reputation, some value from those days. Like Sean Waltman and Billy Gunn, stuff like that. AJ Styles, Odinson appearing on that show, but Odinson was already in All Japan Pro Wrestling. Odinson and Paro, the end, that's where they got big at. And it wasn't like the NWA immediately booked Paro and Odinson from All Japan Pro Wrestling. We got Odinson much later. Remember, Paro came in first. Paro was at the NWA 70th anniversary show, and then Paro came back, and then they gave us the end. And by the time we got the end, Paro looked like shit, and I hate that because I really liked Paro the wrestler. I wish we had the Paro and Odinson that we had in All Japan, and of course the NWA did what they do, and they found a decent partner to pair Odinson with, and we got Kratos and Odinson, which is a fantastic tag team. But it would be cool if there was a relationship with All Japan and the NWA, and we had some cross-promotional stuff. That would be very, very cool. King Sean Vega says, All Japan is small, just like the NWA. They should work together. The precedent, the ideology that All Japan is this huge promotion, it's not like what it was. It's still, I think, to many fans, All Japan is probably considered bigger than the NWA. It's not. They're probably doing bigger venues than the NWA. And then, and Sean says, WOW should work with the NWA. I 100% second that. In fact, I feel like that's 100% where they should have gone. The NWA women's title, the Burke, and the NWA women's tag titles should be featured on WOW. I think there should be a direct correlation between the two. WOW could treat the NWA titles as secondary titles, and WOW titles could be treated like secondary titles for the NWA. Both would benefit from a change of talent and an exchange of talent. Both would benefit from the notoriety. Having, the WOW talent show up in the NWA to challenge, and vice versa, I think would be a huge, huge benefit to both companies. Valentina Rossi came from WOW. We know that Santana Garrett has been working for WOW quite regularly. We know that Hollywood Haley J has been closely affiliated with WOW. The Island Girls, the Tonga Twins, both came from WOW. So there's been a lot of crossover already, but it's not like in an official capacity. It's not like WOW says, okay, we're working together here with the NWA. It just happens. Yeah, Miss Mia, if you're not watching WOW, I'm not saying you're missing out on great wrestling content, but it's different and it's more of a show. And I think doing shows like that again, wrestling is 31 flavors, man, and everyone has an opportunity to watch what they want to watch. WoW is not going to be the most competitive pro wrestling, but it's supposed to be entertaining. And the one WoW event that I went to had a lot of great matches and a lot of talents that I liked. La Reina del Rey, one of my favorites that works there, but Princess Aussie's really good. They used to have Abilene Maverick, who was a former NWA Women's Champion too. There was a lot of crossover, but just nothing in official capacity. No WoW versus NWA agreement, which I think would be great if they did. Willie's not a big fan of Haley J, apparently. All right, I got to get to more comments over here. Sam, we're not going to talk about Richard Arpin. Nah, we're not going to talk about him. Yeah, Chance Prophet was the guy. There was Chance Prophet, Damian Wayne, Drew Onyx. I don't do it justice. But there was some really good NWA talent back in the day that was, lesser known. Carl the Machine Gun Anderson, TJ Perkins. Overmetal says, hello, about to go powerlifting with my son with an Olympian. You got a broken neck? That's not good. Patrick says, I always heard it was a cluster F to get anniversary shows before Billy Corgan bought it. Yeah, the anniversary shows were never the same. The anniversary shows today are treated like a pay-per-view level, where back then the anniversary show was a byproduct of the annual meetings. It was a place to showcase and introduce talent to other audience. So when you had the aforementioned 25 promotions working together to put on an event, almost every match was a title match. But, that was also how the NWA got Finn Balor, Fergal Devitt. That's how they got Carl the Machine Gun Anderson. That's how, again, Chance Prophet got his name. That's how Drew Onyx and these guys, they got these opportunities because at these anniversary shows, all of the talent would be there and all the NWA promoters would be like, I like him, I like him, I like him. Okay, cool. And they would book them. And if it wasn't for those anniversary shows, Dave Marquez would not have booked Finn Balor, would not have picked up Too Bad Chad Allegra. And, some of these guys would have never made it to that next step that they made. So, all right. So Retro saying that All Japan and NWA are similar sized buildings. So, okay. Well, hey, man, I'm for it. I think the NWA would be smart to start galvanizing a relationship with some of these international promotions. Pro Wrestling Noah is connected at the hip with WWE. We don't. They haven't officially said it. We don't think there's an actual cross promotion happening, but they sent Omos. I never say that guy's name right. Charlie Dempsey's going over there. They're sending some of their NXT talent to go work these shows for Pro Wrestling Noah, and it would be interesting if the NWA and All Japan can form a relationship like that. Look, there's guys on the roster. Talus has been there recently, but imagine if they would have sent somebody like right now, Tom Latimer. Right now, Thrillbilly Silas Mason, Slade, Mondo, like these guys would do well in All Japan. Both parties would benefit. Trevor Murdoch, geez, he'd be the modern day Stan Hansen in All Japan Pro Wrestling. Just clotheslined the hell out of people. Him and Mike Knox could have ran wild like Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen. It would have been amazing. I got a little too excited there. I apologize. Willie Bowen says, wow, my favorite Princess Aussie, Tormenta, Furry, Adriana Gambino, Gigi Gianni, Big Rig Betty, Jesse Jones, Reina Del Rey, and Chainsaw. And Adriana Gambino's now in the NWA. Retro says, I have the 55, 56, and 57, and they're all horrible. That's awesome. Vicky Lynn McCoy, Lena Cross, Ollie Catch should be on the NWA women's rosters. Vicky Lynn McCoy is getting up there. I don't know if she could still go. I wouldn't mind the Page sisters going to Ice Ribbon or Sendai. Again, yeah, okay. If the look, And your boy Jay doesn't have control over anything. I don't get to say anything. But almost. Okay, thanks, Chris Shoemaker. Chris just taught me how to say almost his name. It's like almost, but just leave the T off. Okay, almost. You got it. All right, we learned something today, folks. Learned something today. Retro says Knox and Murdoch versus the Saitos would have been good. I'm just saying, like, in this world of professional wrestling we live in, WWE has partnerships with TNA and Pro Wrestling Noah. They own AAA, and I wouldn't be surprised if they end up owning both TNA and Pro Wrestling Noah by the end of next year. Just saying. And then you've got AEW, who has really good working relationships with both Pro Wrestling or New Japan Pro Wrestling and CMLL, as well as Rev Pro in the UK. And I wouldn't be surprised if at some point there is more cross promotion between those three companies. And everyone else is kind of on their own. You know, like MLW has that similar relationship with CMLL and New Japan Pro Wrestling. That's why we see some of those guys come back and forth. Right now, it seems like they're focusing heavy on that CMLL relationship. But, you know, Pro Wrestling Noah kind of has a relationship with the Crash in Mexico. I wouldn't be surprised to see if those two companies work together at some point if Pro Wrestling Noah doesn't end up becoming a WWE property by the end of next year. With that being said, you've got All Japan Pro Wrestling, kind of an island to itself. You got WWC Puerto Rico all by itself. And you've got the NWA, who really is all by itself too. And if they could work something out where you had a talent exchange and you're sending these guys, like with Trevor Murdoch's already working in Puerto Rico, you've got Talos already working in Japan, like having cross promotion with these guys. Silas Mason in All Japan is literally a license to print money. And the fact that it hasn't happened already is kind of a shame. All right, more of your guys' comments. Impact says, I think Davey Boy Smith Jr. is the All Japan Triple Crown champion. I think you're right, Impact. And that, again, we had Davey Boy Smith Jr. in the NWA, and they put him in a tag team. Again, I love Davey Boy, Harry Smith. Let's just call him Harry Smith. I loved Harry Smith in the NWA, but I would have much rather him been a singles competitor challenging Nick Aldis for the 10 pounds of gold as opposed to being a tag team partner of Doug Williams. And Doug Williams is awesome too. But having Harry Smith in the NWA, he should have been carrying gold for the NWA. He did. He won the tag title, but as a singles competitor, he would have been awesome. The Immortals too. Yeah, absolutely. The Immortals would be great. The Immortals, Murknox, right? Tom Latimer, Silas Mason, we said Murknox, would all been stellar in a cross promotion, trade off with All Japan Pro Wrestling. And, maybe we get Harry Smith in the NWA for a bit. I think that I'd be all right with that. Okay. Patrick Moore says no, Jun Saito is okay. That's cool. Still all the same. The point remains, I don't think Cyber Fight will sell Noah. Okay. Io Sky is going to Marigold. There you go. Is Benjamin Mora's WWA International still running? Patrick, I don't think it is. The quickest way for me to find out is to go to a little website called Cage Match and type in WWA. And the World Wrestling Association from Tijuana looks like they closed up shop in 2017. The last show that I have results for in 2017 was Cibernetico defeating LA Park in Tinieblas Jr., Misterio Negro 1 y Misterio Negro 2 defeated Angel Metallico and El Hijo de Rey Mysterio, which that El Hijo de Rey Mysterio is actually deluxe. Then you had Espanito y Pierrita Morgan defeating Mini Rey Mysterio and Octagoncito. You had, and that Mini Rey Mysterio is Mini Rey Mysterio. And then you had Starboy. Who did Starboy? Starboy, also known as. Oh, that's not right. Starboy. Okay. Anyways, sorry. Lucha Libre excites me. So when we talk about Lucha Libre, I don't have a problem with that. Noob says, I hope that Natalia Markova can defend the NWA women's title all over the place because she might put on some exciting matches against some of the women all around the world. Yeah, well, like she recently appeared in a Lucha Libre promotion in south of the border. So good for her. Chris said, Jay, why didn't Billy work with the AAA more than they did? I mean, so look, they did the Worldless Vampire Tour in 2023, and during that Crockett Cup, we had teams from AAA show up. I can't remember everyone, but I know Arez was there. Let me see if I could pull those names up real quick. They had Arez. Sorry. Let's see. You had Los Vipers, which is Arez and Toxin. Let's see. I think there was more than that. They had the Outrunners. That was awesome. Let's see. Oh, yeah, and then they had Mysticis Jr. and Octagon Jr. as Los Intes del Air, which they were an established tag team in the 2023 Crockett Cup. Let's see. That same group had the trios titles with El Vikingo and Laredo Kid. So they did. What happened to Blake Bulletproof Troop and Dak Draper? Bulletproof Troop, I think, just went back to doing MMA. I think he's still in the wrestling business, but I don't think he's done anything recently. And as far as Dak Draper, I don't know what happened to Dak. So to answer your question, Chris, I don't really know. The World is a Vampire Tour was seemingly very successful. I mean, I was there. It was part of the concert that Billy had there too. And it would have been cool if they would have went back in 2023 or 2024, 2025 as part of this annual thing. But clearly that wasn't in the cards. The event itself, I felt, was really cool to see NWA talent in Mexico City. Mecha Wolf having that opportunity to defend the tag titles, him and Bestia in Mexico City against Blue Demon Jr. Vampiro was a pretty cool deal. Having Psycho Clown taking on Trevor Murdoch, Arez and La Idera taking on Markova and Aaron Stevens was cool. Kerry Morton in the same ring with Jack Cartwheel was pretty cool before Jack Cartwheel became kind of a regular for the NWA. Homicide teaming with Scion to take on a Commander and who was the other guy? Anyways, it doesn't matter. I feel like that was a missed opportunity, to be quite honest with you. And I wish they would have done more with AAA. But, again, these things, there's a lot of moving pieces in there. And when all co-promoted events, it's hard to just narrow things down. It's not like Billy Corgan is a billionaire like Tony Khan, and it's not like AAA was doing big business at the time either. AAA is kind of in a bad situation recently, and that's part of the reason why they were able to be sold to the WWE. Patrick, what do you mean? How did I find what? Oh, the UWA? I just went to Cage Match and I typed it in, UWA. It was right there. Natalia definitely going to be defending in Forney, San Antonio, Long Island, and maybe New Mexico. Yeah, I feel like Natalia will definitely be around quite a bit. 2023 was the best Crockett Cup. Just watched yesterday. That was the one with Mecha Wolf and Bestia. That also had Harry and Doug. It also had them boys, Briscoes, RIPJ, and they had Paro and Odinson. They had Hawks Ari. That was a good year. Is Big Mama still in the NWA? Well, it's kind of funny. Retro already answered it. She will be at the next Exodus Pro show. As far as I know, she still is. But it's all about getting booked. When is she going to be booked next? And I know that she has dates with the United Wrestling Network. She's still the women's champion in the UWN. So it's kind of, we'll have to wait and see. With that being said, we only briefly talked about this week's Power in that the Pope is making his return, and he'll be taking on Mims in a non-title match. But we also have Rich Swann making his NWA in-ring debut against Alex Misery. That's going to be for a number one contendership for the junior heavyweight title. Rich Swann from TNA, former TNA world champion, former TNA X Division champion, has his sights set on the National Wrestling Alliance. And the cool thing about this is we know from Rich Swann, he will be making multiple appearances for the NWA. He's also going to be part of the Black Harvest event that's taking place for Crossfire Wrestling next month as well. So, I think we're going to see a lot more of Rich Swann lately, and I think that's great because he's one of those value-added names that the NWA is using. Then we also have TV's Most Attractive with Tiffany Nieves defending her title against Aaliyah James. Aaliyah James is from across the border in the UK, so she's getting an opportunity, a very rare opportunity, to take a shot at Tiffany Nieves in the TV title. And then lastly, Eric Smalls seeks revenge on Murknox as they really beat him to an inch of his life at the Crockett Cup in that match against Odinson and Kratos. And so he has a tag team that he's bringing together to take on Murknox for those tag titles. We'll see how that pans out for those gentlemen. But I think it's going to be a very cool night of wrestling. The NWA is really, like I said, they have been on a very good path. I think since the Crockett Cup 2025, the shows have been good to great. I haven't seen a below average show. And I think that's really cool. I think the NWA needs this. They need this opportunity. What border? The North American border. Thank you for all the gifts, Dog Pro Wrestling. Real quick, Chris Shoemaker says, we always acknowledge Tony Khan's bankroll, but I'm underestimating the Saudi money flowing in WWE. Yeah, it's pretty intense what they're doing over there in Saudi. Thanks for all the love. Dog, we haven't seen NWA wrestling this week, but we're gonna be watching at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, right here on the old Roku, which is where you can watch it. But just to wrap things up, because we are starting to run out of time here. Chris says Tiffany is the match he's looking forward to the most. Well, with good reason. She's very talented. Sam says Pope is pimping. I can't wait to see it. I am a Pope fan. I'm wearing my Pope shirt. I hope Pope takes Mims to the whooping house and gives him a whooping. Because I want to see the Pope make one last run for the 10 pounds of gold. I'd like to see him challenge the winner at Saul Win. Of course, he needs some matches to build up. So if he beats the Mims tonight, we'll see what happens next for him. But he's definitely a guy who I feel like brings added value to the NWA. And then Patrick Moore says, is it just me or is it infuriating trying to follow the territories comprehensively? No, it's terrible. And that's because they're not treated as a cohesive unit, but each of them is their own separate entity. And that's kind of what happened to the NWA in the past. The whole reason why Alliance-Wrestling.com exists was there's no comprehensive place to follow all the NWA members from back in the day. We are in territory town now. So you have territories in St. Louis, Missouri. You have territories in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in Forney, Texas, in San Antonio, Texas, in Sayersville, Tennessee, and really Eastern Tennessee with Joe Kazana Promotions. And in Florida, they have the adjacent promotion, FTW. So, and of course, Chicago. Can't forget about Chicago or Exodus Pro, which I almost forgot about. So there's a lot of territories, and it would be good if somebody could just put all that together and make it one viable place to keep up with it all. And maybe that's a good business idea for you, Patrick. Maybe you could join the alliance and become the territory reporter. Yeah, Willie, we talked about Popes and Mims at the very beginning of the show. Patrick, is it possible for the NWA to get a faster taping turnaround? 100%. Yes, it's possible. Is it realistic? Probably not. I mean, look, this is the 6th anniversary of the first tapings for NWA Power. You got to remember, they filmed on September 30th and October 1st, with the first episode of Power being on October 8th. So less than a week they filmed, and they debuted on YouTube. So yeah, it is. I stand corrected. Sam. I stand corrected. You are correct, sir. Yes, sir. But yeah, I feel like this is going to be a good night for wrestling. I feel like the NWA is going to put on a good show. And if you guys are tuning in, make sure you tweet about it. You Instagram about it. You get all that stuff out there so that people know what's going on, that we're not the only voice that's talking about it, but collectively we all are. And then real quick, I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but our friends over at Dangerous Adrenaline Wrestling Gladiators are holding an event that's coming up, I think this Thursday, in New Jersey. And they have Vinny the Fixer scheduled. Primal Fear will be scheduled. Valerie Vermin will be scheduled. Fala Bala, the World Wrestling Grand Prix champion, David Goldie. And of course, they just announced today, Richard Holiday will be on that card. So the matches don't air live, but you can see them on the Dog YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and do that so that you won't miss out on any of the action. Patrick, Billy Corgan doesn't pay me to do this. I'm just saying, get out there and do it, man. There's a need for it. The market is demanding it. All right. So that's going to do it for us, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me on this Tuesday. I do appreciate you hanging out with me each and every Tuesday to talk pro wrestling. We'll be back on Thursday, both on all platforms at the Alliance blog. We'll be talking about this week's Power. We'll be talking about Saul Win, and we'll see what else comes up during the course of these conversations. So that's going to do it for us now. And until next time, we will see you at the matches.
Every Tuesday, 5 p.m. before NWA Power.